Once upon a beautiful spring day, an amazing news spread through the village that the residents had encountered a polar bear. How it ended up in this area is a true mystery. Polar predators inhabit the Arctic, but this enormous beast somehow managed to teleport to the Sea of Okhotsk. In fact, the adventures of this polar bear could fill a separate story. It is hard to imagine how many obstacles it had to overcome to get here. The story goes that the polar predator set off in search of its next prey. The animal wanted to feast on a fatty fish, so it was testing its luck near the water. At first, the bear was cautious on the fragile ice, but then it became so engrossed in fishing that it broke off a chunk of the ice with its weight. The animal did not want to plunge into the icy water. The bear hoped to find some land, but it was swiftly carried away by the current. The polar creature was still quite young, and its lack of life experience affected its inaction. Instead of returning to its native areas, the young male traveled a long way. Thus, it found itself in a different region. No one can know for sure how much time was spent on this unforgettable journey. It is quite possible that the bear could have reached the islands in just a few days, but that is just an assumption. And while the cold did not greatly hinder the polar predator, the feeling of hunger knew no bounds. As soon as the bear set foot on the long-awaited land, it began searching for something edible. However, the village turned out to be not the best place for feeding such an exotic creature. Moreover, there were people living in the village, and they made unfamiliar sounds that scared the bear away. The predator was wary of the local population, so it kept its distance from the houses. Meanwhile, hunger grew stronger and stronger. The uninvited guest had to change its decision, and the bear headed towards the village. On its way, it came across a small house where a family of the local police officer lived. But there was nothing to snack on in the yard. Soon, the bear lay down right on the ground to regain its strength. At one point, it was spotted by the police assistant. The guy had come to work for his superior and discovered an unusual guest in his yard. At first, he was very scared, but then he composed himself and reported the situation to his superiors. After several phone calls, a few more police officers arrived in the yard. The polar bear was enormous even while lying down. It was frightening to disturb such a large predator. Its size and sharp claws made people behave very quietly. The police tried to observe the animal up close, but each step was taken with great caution. Soon, local residents appeared in the yard. They also wanted to catch a glimpse of the polar predator. When else would they get the chance to see an Arctic inhabitant up close and personal? The bear continued to sleep, but at the same time, it made strange sounds that vaguely resembled a painful groan. Soon, one of the police officers noticed an unnatural position of the sleeping animal's paw. Apparently, it was seriously injured. People did not know how to help such a giant animal, so they contacted a specialist. The representatives of nature conservation were surprised to hear that a polar bear had been discovered in the local village. The specialists did not waste any time and quickly headed to the scene. The police had to guard the bear and also ensure that it did not leave the yard. The specialists arrived at the location and held lengthy discussions. They even had to make several calls to more experienced colleagues. As a result of the long negotiations, the verdict was made: the polar bear must be returned to its homeland. Of course, the accidental guest could not handle this task on its own. The villagers, along with the visiting experts, began to ponder this issue. How could they return the bear to the Arctic? The areas near the Sea of Okhotsk could not serve as a worthy habitat for such a predator. It needed a different living environment. One of the representatives of nature conservation stated that this was not the first case in his practice. Occasionally, polar bears are carried away on ice floes. Climate change and food conditions adversely affect these animals. Most of them die without managing to adapt to the new realities. The villagers unanimously insisted that this could not be allowed. They needed to come up with a way to transport the animal back to its usual habitat. After much contemplation, they came up with a suitable idea. Fortunately, other volunteers also emerged who agreed to carry out the rescue mission. Local officials ensured that the bear was sent to the Arctic by air in a special cage. Organizing this event took just over a week, but haste could jeopardize the plan. In reality, timing was tight, so it was important to carefully consider each step of the upcoming flight. The specialists decided to sedate the animal to reduce the risks of it experiencing serious stress. Soon, a special flight set off on its fateful journey. Initially, the flight went smoothly, but what happened shortly after caused considerable anxiety among the crew members. At one point, the bear woke up from the anesthetic and began shaking the cage. Passengers on board didn't even know who to be more afraid for, themselves or the animal. Such unexpected behavior from the predator could have turned into a real disaster for everyone. However, the flight continued without interruption. The animal's activity began to decline, and concerns gradually faded away. Now the passengers were only worried about the condition of the animal. After a successful landing, the specialists started to free the bear from the cage. The polar bear, although not immediately, confidently stepped onto the snowy territory and took great pleasure in breathing the Arctic air. For it, this was a long-awaited bliss. Soon, the bear began to pick up speed and disappeared.